let's get started, inshallah. So on today's agenda, first, we'll try to get to know everyone a little bit, and then we'll talk about EPC topics, and then we'll start going into the writing process and how we can write a great essay in order to address the prompt or the topics that are for this year's EPC competition. So just to start, again, if everyone can put their level or grade next to their name so we can get a good idea of where everyone's at. And I also would like to know, is this your first EPC or have you already participated before? So if you can, in the chat or out loud, you can say, is this your first competition or you've participated for 1 year or 2 years? How many years have you participated before? So yeah, feel free to write that in the chat if you can. Okay.
This is my first year doing
First year. Wonderful. Welcome, and I hope you have a great experience, inshallah.
Thank you.
Right, great to hear. So we have some people's first years. We have some people who are grade 7, grade 8, so the middle school levels. We have third years, grade 3, grade 5. Okay, very good. All right, we have some other people who it's their first year. We have some people participating for second or fourth years, mashallah. That's really great. So wherever you are in the process, I hope you will be able to learn something new and have a good time while participating in this year's competition. All right, so let's take a look first at our topics for this year, which will be very important to know really well so that we can start thinking about how to write a great essay or speech. All right, so first of all, we have elementary school. So for level 1, which will be grades 1 and 2, I don't know if we have any in first or second grade yet, but we'll go through the topic. So for level 1, we're going to write a letter. We want to think about how we use technology in order to learn or in order to talk to other Muslims. And what would life be like if we didn't have these types of technology, right? So yes, I don't think anyone is in level 1 and 2, unless you haven't written so in your name. So if you are in level 1 or 2, you can write that so that we have an idea, inshallah. Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay, and then for grades 3 and 4, you'll be in level 2. So for this level, we are thinking about the role of technology in your life as a student. How do we use technology as we're learning? What are some benefits of using technology as we are in school and some challenges or drawbacks of using technology? So we can think about being in the classroom or for learning about Islam and about our religion. And because there are benefits and drawbacks of both, what would be a good balance to be in between those two? So we can use technology for good. And very important for us to use evidence to support our response. So I think we have a few people in that grade level, so this will be what you'll be thinking about. Okay. For grades 5 through 8, we'll be in levels 3 and 4. And here we're going to be thinking about AI, or artificial intelligence, which is starting to be very common in a lot of our parts of life. And so we want to think about how Muslim youth can balance the advantages of AI with the responsibility of staying true to their faith. This might involve thinking about how AI can support the way that we learn, and also what dangers, challenges, and drawbacks might come with AI. And then to make an even stronger essay, we want to imagine a project or initiative that could use AI for good, use it for us to use it to strengthen our faith or in order to improve the way that we learn and benefit the community. And I think we have at least a few people in this category as well. And high school, which I don't think we have many people joining at the moment, but we don't have a set topic. It'll just be related to this overall topic of faith and technology navigating the age of AI. And so we can still start brainstorming ideas even from now, either based on the other levels topics or about other important things or important topics that might come to your mind when you're thinking about artificial intelligence and technology while we're learning. Okay, so now we have these big topics. These are big questions, right? And there's not a single answer, which is why we're writing a whole essay about it. So now we need to think about how can we write an essay that is really unique and is thinking about a really interesting aspect of this question. And we want to also think about how we can effectively communicate this idea to the audience. So what are the steps of the writing process? We started off, of course, by thinking about the topics. And then now that we have the topics in our mind, we want to think about what is our purpose in writing this essay? What do we want to convey? And who's going to be reading this? Because that's going to be important in determining how you're going to write your essay. And then we can think of brainstorming, where we think up a lot of different topics in order for us to figure out what we're going to be writing our essay about. So maybe we've thought of a few different ideas now. We can start putting together our essay. And in the first step, we're going to think about our thesis statement or our main idea. What is the one thing that I'm trying to say in this whole essay? And we can't make up something from our head, right? We need to have it supported by evidence. So we're going to do a lot of research. We're going to look for different types of sources and make sure that all the different types of sources that we find can support our main idea or thesis statement. We're going to think about how we're going to structure all of ideas so that it makes sense for somebody reading it. And to do that, we'll write an outline where we put all of our ideas and our evidence together and organized in a way that makes sense. And finally, we can start writing. So here is where we'll start writing our essay, put all of our ideas down at first, and then later we can go through and edit, proofread, and review. And finally, we also want to go through our essays and try to make it really shine and stand out. So just to get an idea, I'd like to know what stage everyone is at. Have you just started learning the topics? Have you already started thinking, like brainstorming? Are you already starting to think of new ideas? Have you already started writing? Or are you kind of in the research state, looking for sources and evidence? So yes, I'd like to know either in the chat or out loud what stage everyone is at.
I'm more around the research stage and the thesis stage, like somewhere in the middle.
Okay, very nice. So you've already started brainstorming. You have an idea of kind of the direction you want to take, and you're looking for evidence to support your thesis statement. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Very nice. Good. Okay, so we have some people kind of still brainstorming, looking at the topics, trying to think about what topics they're going to write about. Okay, we have some people who've already started writing. They're nearly done. And then they're going to go back and proofread, review, and try to make sure that their writing is really strong. Great. Okay, so we have people in all different parts of the writing process, which is very nice. And today we'll kind of look at strategies for each of these steps. So no matter where you are in the process, hopefully you'll be able to learn some new techniques. Okay, so yes, more people also still on their own topics and brainstorming. That's great. Okay, very nice. So again, hopefully everyone is familiar with the topics on the Mafiq website. And let's go forward from here. Okay, so first let's think about purpose and audience. So once we were looking at the topic, we first want to think about the purpose of our writing. The two of the main ones that we might want to think about is either we're informing or persuading. Informing meaning that we are trying to inform or teach the person who is reading our essay about an idea. So this might be like a little bit of history or some facts about what your position is, or we might be thinking about persuading. So perhaps we have a position we want to make about how AI can be useful or how technology can be useful, but that we must be able to use it in a safe and resourceful way in order to outweigh the negative possibilities. So we want to think about, what do I hope to accomplish by writing your essay? And this is something that you'll think about the whole time so that you stay focused on trying to achieve your purpose. We also are not writing this essay only for ourselves. We're going to write this for an audience. So you want to think about who is going to be reading your essay. And thinking about who your audience will be will help you decide what to put into your essay. What do they know about the topic already? You want to give them enough information so that they understand what you're talking about, but you're not telling them too basic things that they already know. You also want to think about what their interests might be, and you want to really try to capture their attention by making sure they understand why this essay that they're reading, that you wrote, might be interesting or useful for them to know. Okay, and we want to think about what types of details will be useful to mention to our audience, and the tone. So whether this is very formal, or if you're writing a letter, for example, this is more conversational. And depending on who's going to be reading this letter or reading the essay, you might change that a little bit. Okay. So next, also, if anyone has questions throughout this presentation, feel free to write it in the chat, and I'll take a look when we can. All right, so now let's talk about some brainstorming techniques. So brainstorming, right, is when we are trying to think of a lot of different ideas. So we have a topic yet, but we don't know exactly how we're going to answer this question or answer this or talk about this topic. There are a lot of different possibilities, so we want to first just list all of the different ideas that we can, and later on we'll kind of go through and be able to pick out the ones that we like. So there are a lot of different ways you can brainstorm. One idea is free writing. So this is where you set a timer for yourself, maybe like 5 minutes. You look at the topic and you just start writing everything that you can think of. It doesn't have to be really good ideas or anything, but you're just freely writing for as long as you can, so that you can just get all the ideas out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Once you're done writing, after that 5 minutes or so, you can go through and see, are there any interesting ideas in what I've been writing, so that I can take this and expand on it a little bit more. Another idea is to write out bullet points. So we start off with a few ideas and then expand on each one. You can think about clustering or making a mind map or a word map. So you start from a central idea and then think about different aspects of it. And each one might have new branches that you could expand on. And as you expand more, you might think, oh, this kind of cluster is more interesting. Maybe I can think about that. Or, oh, maybe this idea is related to this idea. Let's put those two together. And you can also just ask a lot of questions. The who, what, when, why, how. As you do that, you might be able to expand more and more on your topic. You have a question in the chat. Should you put quotes? You can put quotes if you think that they're related to your topic and they serve a purpose. So maybe it's something interesting and it's something that will capture your audience's attention. You can put that at the beginning. Or it might be informative and they'll be able to learn from it. So you could put that as an evidence as well. Okay, so let's, for example, we have these 4 different examples of brainstorming techniques. Let's see what they look like in practice. Okay, so let's imagine we're in the level 1 topic where we want to explain how we use technology to learn about Islam or talk to other Muslims, and how life would be different if we didn't have this technology. Let's say we want to do the brainstorming technique of bullet points. So we can just start listing some ideas that are related to this topic. So for example, first, we're writing a letter. Who do you want to send this letter to? Maybe it's a friend who is using the same technology as I am in the classroom, but maybe we have different ways that we use it. Maybe it's a cousin who lives in a different state, and maybe they learn differently than I do. Maybe I want to share with them how some technology that I use in my classroom that they might find interesting. Or maybe it's even someone like your grandmother. Maybe she lived in a different time and the technologies that you use are different from what she learned or what she used in the school. So it's going to be a different way of explaining versus somebody who is already familiar with your technologies. We continue with other bullet points. Let's think about, how do I learn about Islam? For example, do I watch videos? Maybe I call people, call people in my family who know a lot of information. Maybe I Google questions. So these are some ways that I use that I learn about Islam now. What are some things that are easy or hard? How would I learn if I didn't have this technology? and what can we learn from this? So this is just an example of brainstorming. As we think up more and more ideas, we can eventually settle on choosing a direction. So maybe I want to choose talking to a friend. Maybe I'm looking at these ways that I learned about Islam and thinking about how some of them are really useful and let me do things I couldn't do before. So that's how we use bullet points. Okay, here's another exercise that we can do for brainstorming. So looking at the level 2 topic, we want to explain the role of technology in our life as a student and the benefits and drawbacks, as well as a good balance. And let's say that brainstorming technology or technique that we want to use is asking big questions. So we can just go through and think about any question that might be related to this topic, trying to expand on it a little bit, right? So for example, what kind of text do I use to learn? How do I use this technology? When do I use it? Is it all the time? Is it only at in certain subjects? And why only for those subjects, right? Why is it useful? Who can use it? Does everyone have the same access to this technology, or are only certain people able to use it? That might be like a benefit or a drawback, right? Again, more why questions, what questions. So just trying to expand as much as we can to think about different aspects that might be related to this topic that you could write about. And then we go through these and maybe one of them is super interesting to you. So I'm thinking about challenges and you're starting to think of a lot of different ones. Maybe that's a good one to expand on and think about. Okay, and for more brainstorming exercises, let's say we are in level 3 through 4, and we're looking at this topic about AI and learning. So let's say that we want to use this clustering or mapping brainstorming method. How can you do that? So first of all, let's go through the topic and highlight some of the words that might be really important for us to think about. Okay, so first we have AI, we have balance, and we have advantages and responsibilities. How can AI support? What dangers might be there? And imagining a new project, specifically using AI to strengthen faith. Okay, so let's think of some main parts of this topic that we can divide into different clusters. All right, so let's say we're going from AI, some things that we can think about, maybe different types of AI and different ways we use AI, right? So what are some different types? There's like your generative AI, like ChatGPT. There's also AI present in social media and algorithms and affecting what kind of things that you see. There are a lot of AI tools out there, right? There's some for organization, there's some for editing, many other ones. You can add different branches. There's even AI for like data analysis. Okay, all these different types. Then what? Let's think of another branch, AI and learning. What kind of tools do we use when we're learning that use AI or that we benefit from? And they might have their benefits, they might have their challenges. And what about another branch? Maybe we can think about AI and Islamic knowledge specifically. And maybe there's other tools, other benefits and challenges. For example, for Islamic knowledge specifically, a big thing that we need to think about is verification. How do you know that what we're learning using AI is accurate and according to the Quran and Sunnah? So that is one big challenge with AI. Maybe we are thinking about some needs. What are things in the world of like learning about Islamic knowledge that could that has something that is not perfect yet or something that we could improve on, and maybe from there you can get a new idea for a project that uses AI to strengthen faith. So an idea like this is how we are able to cluster different ideas. You can add more branches. You can even draw lines to connect different ideas with each other. And maybe that way you can generate a lot of different ideas to go towards your topic. And of course, there might be more brainstorming ideas out there. These are all just ways to expand on the topic and get a lot of ideas out. All right. So let's say we've done a few brainstorming exercises, and you can do as many as you can, the better to get the more ideas out. Then, once we have a lot of different ideas, let's look through them, and then we want to think, what kind of story do I want to tell? Or what is the main point that I want to convince my reader about? So here is where we think about our main idea or thesis statement. So main ideas are, I guess you can think about this more for like the lower levels, such as levels 1 and 2, which are writing a letter. Or sorry, level 1, writing a letter. But what will your whole essay or letter be talking about? And once you get into the higher grades, we're thinking more about thesis statements. So this is one sentence, and it kind of explains everything that you want to convey in your essay. So it should mention or give an idea of the purpose. It should kind of restate the topic so that it shows that you are addressing the topic, right? And it'll give an idea of what kind of writing strategy you're using, what kind of evidences you bring up in order to make this big point. So let's think of some examples. Let's say somebody is planning to write an essay about saving the whales. This is the first trial of a thesis statement. Saving the whales should be a top priority. So this tells you what you want to say in the essay, but it doesn't have any other information. It doesn't say how you're going to convince the reader that saving the whales is important. Instead, a better way to write your thesis statement is to give some evidence that you are using to support this big idea. Okay, so saving the whales is your big idea, and saving the whales will have a positive effect, which will end up helping us maintain our planet's health and ecosystems. Okay, so now you have a better idea of why this person is trying to convince you that saving the whales is important. Okay, and another example here. If we just say for our thesis statement in this paper, I will explore popular childhood fairy tales. That is saying what you are going to do, but it doesn't tell the reader, why is this important, or why should I listen to you? Instead, if you go through that a little bit more, you'll say fairy tales don't just make good bedtime stories, but they help explain the psychology of children. Now you have a little bit more information. Oh, this is why fairy tales might be useful, or this is why I should be interested in reading this essay. Okay. So again, I don't think we have a lot of level 1 here, but just to go through briefly, if we are trying to write a letter, what are the different parts of our letter? So we'll start off with the greeting, right? Dear whoever you are writing, who you are trying to talk to, and start with some greetings, maybe say salams, maybe ask how they're doing or the last time that you've seen them. And then you then want to go into your main idea, but you can't go right away and just say, this is my main idea. You want to get there in a way that the person would be interested in reading. And then once we mention our main idea, we want to support it. So we can give some examples or stories, talking about, imagine if we didn't have technology in our lives, what would it look like? And then we can close out the letter with what we hope that they remember or that they take from this letter, and then we can give them a farewell. Now, in writing the thesis statement. So we can do this quick activity where look at your topics. So here we have level 2 or levels 3 through 8. First, we want to take this topic and kind of restate it. You can make it into a question or say it in different words. So for example, here, explain the role of technology in your life as a student. So, and the benefits and drawbacks, you might say, technology plays a, technology plays a role in my life as a student by ... Or what is the role, what is the role of technology in my life? And then we want to make a claim, okay? So this is where you're going to put your big idea. Technology is good in my life because it achieves this specific purpose that would not be possible without it. Because it opens up new avenues or new possibilities, because it makes it a lot easier to do something, because it increases the speed. What is your big claim or big idea? And then we're going to write here the main points that you're going to explore in your paper. So these are the things that are supporting your big claim, okay? So for example, if the topic was about the primary causes of climate change, and then this is our big idea that climate change is caused by human activities, we're going to mention a few of those examples of human activities that cause climate change that we're going to talk about, okay? So you'll write, for example, 1, 2, 3 of the main points that you're going to write about in your essay. So perhaps you're focusing on how AI can support creativity. And you write here, here's one example of how AI can support a specific type of creativity. Here are some challenges that might come with that. And here's some ways to address that. And here's a new idea that can use AI for creating. And then we'll put it all together. So going back to that climate change example, we see how first we have our big idea, climate change is caused by human activities. And then we talk about the main points that we're going to expand on in our essay. Okay, so here are some of the human activities that lead towards climate change. Okay, so by doing these 3 steps, you may be able to start writing our thesis statement to convey our big idea. All right, so at this point, now we have an idea that we want to convey. But again, we can't just make this up. We need to be able to back up our big claim with evidence. So this is the research stage, and we're going to be looking for different types of sources that can support our argument. And some of the different types of sources that we may be able to look for include past events. So past events that, for example, have shown how technology has been useful for a certain application, for example. So you might look at newspapers or magazine articles, books, an encyclopedia, or online. And again, we want to make sure that we have a way of understanding how accurate this information is that we're looking for online. So is this a reputable newspaper? Or is this just somebody's blog and their personal opinion? We want to make sure that we have good, accurate, and strong information when we're looking online or anywhere for evidence. We might look up some facts. Maybe we're looking at statistics. Maybe this percentage of people were able to improve their classroom skills by using Chromebooks, for example. I don't know. But you might be able to find facts from dictionaries, from scholarly papers, or using logic. So different types of facts that you may be able to use to back up your claim. Stories and anecdotes might be very useful. You may be able to convey a certain kind of personal or a more narrative feel by having a story like about yourself firsthand, or a story about someone else and perhaps an experience that they had that might be able to help back up your claim. And of course, we have Islamic sources as well, including the Quran, translation, tafsir, from the lives of the Prophet ﷺ. So we have hadith and narrations, and so, as well as stories from the lives of the prophets and companions, or also stories from prominent people in the religion, or things that like a sheikh has said, anything like that. As long as, again, we think about the strength and the accuracy of the source, as well as how does it relate to our topic. So we want to make sure that we stay focused and stay on topic. And as we do more and more research, we might go back to our thesis statement and think, maybe I should change the direction of this a little bit. So you can go back and forth, kind of adjust your statement, adjust your big idea or the main thing that you're trying to convey based on the things that you learn. All right. So let's say now that you have your ideas, you have a thesis statement, you have an idea of what you want your whole essay to convey, and you have a lot of different types of evidence that support your claim. Now let's think about how we're going to write our essay. So your essay will have an introduction, it'll have the body, and it'll have the conclusion. In the introduction, we want to start off with some background information, perhaps, something to prep or introduce the reader to your topic, and it leads to your thesis statement, which is, again, your big main idea, as well as the thesis statement should contain your main points so that the reader knows what you're going to be talking about in your essay. And then you'll have body paragraphs. And in each paragraph, you want to make sure that you start off with a topic sentence for the entire paragraph. Then you'll have support sentences, all of which relate to your topic and include evidence and examples. And the paragraph will end with a concluding sentence that brings everything together from that paragraph and gives the reader an idea of what you're trying to say with your paragraph. Okay. And perhaps you'll have multiple paragraphs because you want to address different main points, all of which go back to your thesis statement and support it. And finally, you'll end with a conclusion. So in your conclusion, we want to, mention again what your main idea was and show how your different main points support this thesis statement. And you'll conclude or end off your paper here. So how many paragraphs will you have? That will depend a lot on the different, or how many main points do you have? So again, you have your big idea and you are going to have some main points that support your idea. And so each main point will be expanded on in a paragraph. So you'll have, usually you want to support your thesis statement with at least 2 or 3 different points. So you'll have 2 or 3 of these body paragraphs, but perhaps you want to add some more paragraphs. Maybe you have, again, for example, you have the prompt that asks for a new idea or an idea of a project that could use AI for strengthening faith. And so maybe you want to have a few paragraphs on this new idea to explain first the idea itself and how it could be beneficial. So all the structure kind of will depend on how many main points that you have to strengthen your thesis statement. Okay. So looking at this structure, once you have your main idea, your thesis, and some examples of evidences, you can start outlining. So you're going to look at all of these sources that you've collected. What points can you make that will be supported by these sources? And how will you organize your supporting sentences to make a strong claim? Again, that claim will be your thesis statement. And then we also want to think about perhaps how are you going to organize your paragraphs? Is it going to be order of importance, problem and then solution, past and present, different aspects? So you're talking about first this aspect, a second aspect, a third aspect. This is, as you write your outline, you'll think about how you're going to organize your paragraphs and put everything in the right order so that the reader has a logical flow. So everything makes sense from the introduction all the way to the conclusion. All right, now let's think about our introduction. So again, we talked about how we have some general statements or background, and then we're talking about our thesis statement. So because this is the introduction that your reader is getting, you want to really capture their attention right away. So we call this a hook. We want to hook your reader's interest right at the beginning of your essay. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. For example, maybe you put a surprising fact or a statistic, something that makes the reader think or makes them surprised. Maybe you can put a story over here that is really interesting and makes the reader start to feel like an emotional connection with what the experience is that you're writing about. And somebody mentioned quotes earlier. You could put a quote here, perhaps, that is really insightful or that makes you think. Maybe you'll start off with a question that can really grab the reader's attention, or a description of something, a description, for example, of a type of technology that you encountered for the first time and you thought, oh, this is really useful. I haven't thought about this before. So maybe that could be an example, or any other ways to form an emotional connection with the reader. So these are some ways of starting off your essay very strong so that the reader starts off already interested in what you're going to say next. Okay. And let's think about the conclusion. So let's say you've outlined your introduction paragraph, you have your thesis statement, you have already thought about all the different evidence and examples that you want to use as your main points to support your thesis statement. And now you want to close out your essay and conclude it. So you want to, again, restate your thesis to, again, remind the reader that this is what you wanted to convince them of by writing this essay. And recap your main points and show how these main points are supporting your thesis and confirming it. And again, this is the last thing that they'll read from you. So you want to tie your whole essay together and kind of leave your reader with something that they can keep thinking about as they move on. All right, so now we've outlined the different parts of our essay, from the introduction to the body paragraphs and the conclusion. And now it's time to write. So here you'll follow your outline. So you can write all of your sentences, fill in your paragraphs, let all the ideas out. If you are writing something that you got this information from one of your sources, make sure you keep track of where those sources came from, because you'll want to cite your sources at the end. And at this point, because it's just your first draft, you don't have to worry too much about perfect grammar or spelling. That will be later on. Right, so here we're going to write the bulk of your essay. Great, now you have a first draft. That's very exciting. And then to kind of go through and first of all, revise that draft on your own. What kind of things are you going to look for? Very important. Did you answer and address the prompt? So go back, look at the topic statement, and look at your essay. Is everything that the prompt asked for mentioned somewhere in your essay? And especially look at your thesis statement. Is your thesis statement directly addressing something that is mentioned in that topic? You want to make sure that everything that you wrote is on topic and relevant. You want to look at your thesis statement. Is it very clear what you're trying to convey to the reader? It's not too abstract or not too general. It's something that's specific that you want the reader to understand. Look at the body paragraphs and the evidence that you used in your essay. Did you use different types of evidence, and did they all go back to support your thesis? And thinking about the structure of your essay, does it make sense logically? For example, you don't want to talk about a technology in your second paragraph that you have not or you talk about an application of a technology in your second paragraph, but then you talk about how this technology works in paragraph 4. And then the reader is confused because you haven't talked about this before. So you want to make sure that everything makes sense and flows. You want to go through also and proofread. So here, after you've done your first draft, this is when you're going to go through and think about spelling and grammar. Think about the tone. Is it formal? Think about the sentence structure, and you want to kind of make sure that everything reads well. And you can also get feedback from others as well. So again, some of the questions that you can ask them is about your thesis statement and how clear it is, the idea that you're trying to convey. Ask them, so this is the different evidence or arguments that I made. This is the different evidence that I mentioned. Do they support my thesis statement? Does the argument that I make, is it clearly supported by the evidence? Did you miss any background information that would have been useful for the reader to know beforehand? And does the reader have any questions or counter arguments? So if you ask them of this and they mention something, for example, a counter argument, maybe they're arguing a part of your thesis statement. And that means that you might need to include a little bit more evidence to reply to that counter argument. And because other readers might have that same idea, it'll be good to include that in your essay. All right, and finally, how can you write an essay that really stands out? Because we want to make our essays unique and very strong. One thing that we can think about is having a really strong and compelling hook and conclusion. Again, the hook being the first thing that the reader reads in your introduction, and we want it to really capture their attention and make them think or make them remember your essay later on. And in your conclusion, again, not only are you restating your main points, but you want to leave the reader with something that they can keep thinking about even after they're done reading your essay. We want to make an insightful argument, not something that's really obvious. For example, something really general like technology is good or technology is bad. That's way too general, right? So when we're writing our thesis statement, we want it to be insightful and specific, something that the reader might have not thought about before, but you can convince them of it by reading the rest of your essay. And how can you make a strong argument? You can use different accurate, strong types of information and sources, and making a thesis statement that your reader, again, might not have thought about before, but it makes them stop and think. And you want to have an interesting but logical essay structure. For example, not just okay, here's a fact, here's another fact, here's another fact, therefore, here you go. But you want to make it a little bit more interesting, kind of show, maybe you'll show different relationships between different types of evidence, just make the reader think. And forming an emotional bond with the reader, thinking how can this topic relate to them or benefit them? Why should they care about it? Why should they listen to what you have to say? We also want to think about active voice, so try to avoid having too much passive voice, saying, using like action verbs. We don't want to be too wordy or too redundant, so try to have very concise sentences, especially when you're going through your proofreading. You want to go through your sentences and make sure you don't have any extra words that might be taking away from your meaning. And finally, we want to see when we're reading your essay that you really care about what you're saying. We want to hear that you are interested yourself about what this topic is, and you're excited to try and convince us or convey to us a new idea, and you're excited to write and talk to us about your topic. The more interested that you are, the more that we might feel as readers that you are talking about something interesting and that we should be really excited about as well. Okay. So with that, Again, there are some topics on the Mafiq website. So if you just go to mafiq.org, you'll be able to find things such as essay guidelines. So you'll find all of your formatting information here about font and size and other things to include. You'll also see an example of a rubric that we will use to grade your essay. So again, looking at ideas, organization, word choice, and other things. And there are also some resources on the website that talk about different parts of the essay, and that might help you in your writing. Okay, I think with that, we are at the end of the workshop. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to share at this moment. Right, if anyone has already started writing and you have a thesis statement, if you want to share it in a private chat, you might be able to have some, get some insights about that, or if you have any other questions. Again, today we talked about the different parts of the writing process. Any sources that we recommend? Yeah, so it kind of depends on what types of sources or what kind of information you're looking for. Are you looking for like statistics? Are you looking for stories? Are you looking for like for example, news articles that mention, oh, this classroom used a new type of technology and it really improved the way that the class learned about this topic. So things like news articles might be good for stories or examples of different different things in kind of society. So yeah, like different magazines or newspapers, things like that. Again, we have sources of Islamic knowledge. You can look up lots of things on Google and then just kind of look at that source and try to verify how accurate that source is. Let's see here. You might also look at primary sources such as encyclopedias. You can look at books. There's also types of different sources. So again, if you are not sure where to start off, you could always start with a Google search. And from there, you might find different types of, again, newspapers, magazines, or articles that give you new ideas. What Islamic sources are most reliable? So again, kind of depends. Are we looking at stories? Are we looking at Quran and tafsir? So then things like tafsir ibn Kathir are the most publicly or like societally accepted as being very strong tafsir. There's a lot of different hadith. We want to make sure that it's from the main books of, for example, Bukhari, Muslim, things like that. Stories from the lives of the prophets, or if we're looking at, for example, like scholarly opinions, you want to kind of do a little background check on the scholars that you're reading about and make sure that they are accepted or they're strongly accepted as reliable sources. But yeah, this is great to see that everyone's thinking about evidence and research and what types of sources you're looking for. Especially in this day and age, you want to be able to verify that the information that you get from online is accurate. And again, topic of this year's EPC is technology and AI. Please do not use AI to write your essays. If you want to use it to generate ideas or to give you information, you want to then verify that this information that they give you is correct. So you'll want to go back and do another Google search and see where that evidence or that information is sourced from. Is that from an article that was factual, or was it just someone's opinion? Things like that. You want to be able to double check. All right. If there's any last questions, feel free to write that in the chat. If not, I think we'll end here for today. Jazakumullahu khairan, everyone, for attending. Inshallah, you'll be able to find this recording on the Mafiq website soon. And yes, Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Mustafiz, if you have anything to close off for today.
Assalamu alaikum.
Maikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Maikum salam.